6 days, that's all you have left, before the most sacred week in the entire Christian calendar begins. Palm Sunday, this coming Sunday. The crowds will wave branches, the churches will fill, and most people, most Catholics, will walk through that door completely unprepared, spiritually naked, going through the motions while the enemy watches, patient and smiling. Padre Pio said it plainly. He didn't soften it. He didn't wrap it in kindness to make you feel comfortable. He said, Holy Week is not a commemoration. It is a participation. You either enter it as a soldier or you enter it as a casualty. And right now, most of us are the casualty. This video is an alarm, not an invitation, an alarm. Because there are 7 things that Padre Pio specifically revealed, warned about, and begged his spiritual children to avoid during Holy Week. 7 things that, if you ignore them, become grave offenses against the very passion of Christ. Not small slip-ups, not minor imperfections, grave sins committed during the holiest days of the year at the foot of the cross itself. The last one is the most dangerous. And it's the one almost no one talks about. If you've been feeling distant from God, if the rosary has started to feel mechanical, like you're just moving beads with your fingers while your mind is somewhere else entirely, if you can't remember the last time you truly wept at the foot of the cross, write right now in the comments, Lord, break open my heart this Holy Week. By writing that, you're not just leaving a comment. You're making a declaration of spiritual war against your own indifference, and heaven hears that. Stay until the end, because what's coming in the final minutes of this video, the 7th thing, it doesn't just apply to the spiritually weak. It applies especially to the devoted, to the ones who think they're ready. You may not be as prepared as you think. To understand why these warnings carry the weight they do, you have to understand who Padre Pio actually was. Not the saint on the prayer card, not the gentle old friar with the fingerless gloves, the real man. Every Friday morning for 50 years, Padre Pio bled, his hands, his feet, his side. The wounds of Christ opened in his flesh, and they didn't close. They stayed raw, they stayed painful, and they stayed real for half a century. Doctors examined him and had no explanation. The blood had an unusual fragrance, like fresh flowers, that people reported smelling from across a room. He didn't ask for this. In fact, when the visible stigmata first appeared in September 1918, he fell to his knees and wept, asking God to take away the visible wounds so no one would look at him instead of looking at Christ. God granted part of that prayer, but the pain never left. During Holy Week, Padre Pio would sometimes lose consciousness from the intensity of it. His brother friars would find him prostrate, pale as death, barely breathing. He was living the passion in his own body, not as a metaphor, not as a spiritual exercise, but as a physical, bloody, undeniable reality. This is the man speaking to you today. When Padre Pio warned about Holy Week, he wasn't quoting a theology textbook. He was speaking from inside the wounds. He knew what it cost. He knew what it meant. And he knew how easily, how casually, how carelessly we throw it away. He once told a spiritual daughter who came to him distressed about her sins, "The devil is not afraid of the Christian who goes to Mass once a year at Easter. He's afraid of the Christian who bleeds with Christ during Holy Week, in prayer, in sacrifice, in silence. The devil is not afraid of your attendance. He is afraid of your transformation. And this Holy Week, starting in 6 days, you have a choice. Show up as a spectator or show up as a soldier." These 7 warnings from Padre Pio are the difference between one and the other. The first thing you cannot do during Holy Week is neglect confession. Not a suggestion, not spiritual advice for the particularly devout. A direct, repeated, urgent command. from a man who spent up to 18 hours a day in that confessional box. 18 hours. His line stretched for days. People came from across Europe. They slept on the street outside the church. They waited for weeks, just to confess to Padre Pio. And he wept in there, not because the sins were shocking. He had heard everything. He wept because souls were coming so close to freedom, and still hesitating at the door, knuckles white on the wood, mouth dry, unable to say the one sentence that would change everything. He said, "Confession is not for the saintly, it is for the wounded. If you haven't confessed since Christmas, if you've been telling yourself you'll go soon, this is not the time for delay." The Triduum, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday. These are not days for spiritual tourism. They are days of death and resurrection. And you cannot be resurrected if you haven't first died to your sin in that confessional. The second thing you cannot do is abandon the rosary. Padre Pio called the rosary his weapon, not his comfort, not his devotion, his weapon. He was seen praying it constantly, between masses, between confessions, in the middle of the night when the pain in his hands kept him from sleeping. He reportedly prayed 30 to 40 rosaries a day. His fingers were always moving, always. During Holy Week, the rosary isn't just prayer, it is a vigil. It is you choosing to stand with Mary at the foot of the cross, instead of fleeing with the apostles into the dark. If your rosary has become routine, beads moving while your mind drifts to dinner, to work, to what you're going to watch tonight, that is not prayer. That is the appearance of prayer. And Padre Pio was relentless on this point. A rosary prayed without the heart is just noise, and noise does not move heaven. This week, pray 1 decade slowly, 1 decade where you actually see the scene. Put yourself at Gethsemane, feel the cold ground, hear the soldiers coming through the trees. 1 decade prayed with your whole soul is worth more than 100 prayed on autopilot. The third thing you cannot do is fill Holy Week with worldly noise. This one will cost you something real. The screens, the endless scroll, the binge-watching, the group chats, the arguments on social media about things that will mean nothing in 10 years. Padre Pio lived in radical silence, not because silence was easy, but because silence was the only place where you could hear what God was actually trying to say. Think about what Christ does during Holy Week. He is silent before Pilate, silent while they mock him, silent on the cross for hours, silent in the tomb. And we can't handle 3 minutes without our phone. That's not judgment, it's just honest. You cannot contemplate a suffering God if you are never still enough to contemplate anything. Cut something this week. One thing, not forever, just for 7 days. And give the silence a chance to show you what it's been holding for you all this time. The fourth thing you cannot do during Holy Week is skip fasting and abstinence. Good Friday is a day of fasting for a reason. The Church isn't being dramatic. She is asking you to feel in your body a shadow, just a shadow, of what Christ felt on that cross. Hunger is small, thirst is small. But when your stomach is empty on Good Friday and you feel that dull ache, you have a doorway. A tiny, physical doorway into the reality of what happened on Calvary. Padre Pio fasted with an intensity that alarmed his superiors. At points in his life, he ate almost nothing for extended periods, surviving, his doctors admitted, in ways that defied medical explanation. He didn't do this to prove his willpower. He did it because his body was his offering. His physical suffering was united to Christ's physical suffering, and that union was not accidental. It was deliberate, daily, total. You don't have to fast like Padre Pio, but you do have to fast like a Christian. Don't eat meat on Good Friday. Fast on Good Friday. And consider adding something personal. Skip the coffee, skip the dessert, skip the meal you were looking forward to. Offer it. Don't just endure it, offer it. Say the words, "Lord, I unite this small hunger to your thirst on the cross." That transforms biology into theology. The fifth thing you cannot do during Holy Week is carry resentment into those days. This one lands differently because most of us have someone, a name, a face, a thing that was done to us that we haven't fully released, and we've made a kind of peace with carrying it, told ourselves it's okay, that we're managing it, that we've moved on enough. Holy Week will expose that lie. Padre Pio was ferocious about this. He once refused to give absolution to a man who had come to confess, not because the man's sins were too great, but because the man refused to forgive someone who had wronged him. The man was shocked. He argued. Padre Pio was immovable. He said, "You are asking Christ to forgive you while you spit on the forgiveness he died to give your brother. Go. When you are ready to mean what you pray, come back." That is not a comfortable story, but look at the cross. The first words Christ speaks from the cross, the first thing he chooses to say while his hands are nailed and his lungs are filling with fluid, is, "Father, forgive them, forgive." Not after the resurrection, not when the pain was over, in the middle of the worst moment of human history, with the blood still running down his face. Forgiveness. If you walk into Holy Week still clenching that resentment, you are walking in the opposite direction of Calvary. Before I show you the truth that changes everything, the deepest warning, the one that strikes at the heart of even devoted Catholics, I want to make sure you already have a weapon in your hands. Because what's coming in the next few minutes will require you to be armed. If this video has moved you and you want to go deeper in your spiritual connection with God, don't miss the chance to get our exclusive ebook, The Spiritual Secrets of St. Padre Pio. Inside, you'll find powerful prayers to transform your life, reflections and teachings to strengthen your faith, and a practical guide to living with true spirituality every single day. The link is pinned in the comments. Get it before Holy Week begins. The sixth thing you cannot do during Holy Week is ignore the contemplation of the Passion. This sounds obvious. Of course, you'll think about the Passion. You'll be at Mass. You'll hear the readings. You'll watch the priest prostrate himself on Good Friday. You'll be surrounded by it. But there is a difference between being surrounded by something and entering into it. Padre Pio didn't just attend the Stations of the Cross, he lived them. There are accounts from the friars at San Giovanni Rotondo who watched him pray the stations alone in the dark, moving from station to station so slowly it took hours. And at certain stations, the third fall, the nailing, the death, he would stop completely. His face would change, his breathing would change. He was not remembering an event from 2,000 years ago. He was there. That is what contemplation of the Passion actually means. You don't need visions. You don't need mystical experience. You need 10 minutes, just 10 uninterrupted minutes, where you sit with one scene and let it become real. Not the sanitized version, the real one. His knees hitting the stone in Gethsemane, not softly hard, the sound sharp in the silence, the sweat like drops of blood running down his neck into the dirt, the cold of that garden, the smell of the olive trees, the sound of his own breathing getting shorter and shorter as the weight of what is coming settles on him like a physical thing. And then the sound of torches, footsteps, a familiar voice, Judas, the man who had walked beside him for 3 years, who had seen the blind receive sight and the dead come back, who had sat at that table just hours before, shared bread from the same hands that were about to be betrayed. Judas walks up to him in the dark and kisses him, warm, familiar, like any other greeting. That is the moment the soldiers grab him. Sit with that scene, all of it, because the kiss of Judas is not an ancient crime. It is repeated every time a baptized soul walks into Holy Week and feels nothing. Let it hurt a little, because if the passion doesn't cost you anything emotionally during these 7 days, something has gone very numb inside you, and numbness is not peace. Numbness is danger. Now, the seventh thing, the most grave. The thing Padre Pio said was the deepest wound a soul can inflict on Christ during Holy Week. Indifference, not hatred, not mockery, not even the betrayal of Judas, which at least required intention, required a choice, required the knowledge of what was being surrendered. Indifference requires nothing. It just watches, nods, goes home unchanged. The soldiers who drove the nails knew they were doing something. Pilate washed his hands because he knew exactly what he was condemning. Even Judas, broken, horrified at what he had done, threw the silver coins back across the temple floor and went and hanged himself because he could not live with the weight of what he had betrayed. None of them were indifferent, but the tepid Catholic, the one who attends every Sunday, who knows all the prayers, who would never commit a serious sin, that soul can sit through the entire Triduum and come out the other side as cold as when they went in. Padre Pio wept over this, more than over any sin he heard in the confessional. He said, documented, recorded by his spiritual directors, the souls that grieve me most are not the great sinners. They know what they've done. They can be brought back. The souls that terrify me are the tepid, the ones who have been baptized, confirmed, who receive communion, who attend Mass, who would never commit a mortal sin in the obvious sense, and who feel nothing. Nothing for Christ on the cross. Tepidity. That is the seventh thing, and it is far more common than we want to admit. You can be in church every Sunday, rosary app on your phone, know every line of every prayer, and still be completely spiritually frozen, going through holy motions with a heart that hasn't moved in years. Holy Week is the cure, but only if you let it be. The question is not whether you will attend Holy Week. The question is whether Holy Week will attend to you, whether you will let those 7 days crack something open inside you that has been sealed shut for a long time. Padre Pio believed it was possible. That's why he warned so urgently not to condemn, because he had seen with his own eyes what a soul looks like when it finally, truly surrenders to the weight of the cross. It is the most beautiful thing in the world. Before we close, let me remind you of something. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days, not hours, days. The stone was sealed. The smell was already there. Martha said it plainly, "Lord, by this time there is a stench." There was no medical scenario in which that man walked out of that tomb, and Jesus wept. Not because he didn't know what he was about to do, but because the grief of the people he loved was real to him. Their pain was not something he bypassed on the way to the miracle. He stopped. He stood still. He let the weight of human sorrow fall on him completely, and then he called Lazarus out of the darkness. That is what he is trying to do with you right now, 6 days before Palm Sunday. Your spiritual life may feel like it has been sealed in a tomb for a while. The devotions have grown cold, the prayers have grown thin, the fire you felt at some point, at confirmation, at a retreat, at a moment on your knees when you just knew God was real. That fire may feel very distant right now. He can call you out of that, but you have to be willing to hear your name. The 7 warnings of Padre Pio are not condemnations, they are invitations. Each one is a door. The confessional, the rosary prayed with your heart, the silence you've been avoiding, the fast that costs something, the name you need to forgive, the 10 minutes you owe the passion, the surrender of your indifference. Walk through those doors. and they all lead to the same place. Easter Sunday, the empty tomb, the folded burial cloth, the unbearable, world-splitting, death-destroying morning when everything changed forever. That morning is 6 days away. Don't waste the journey getting there. Padre Pio prayed one sentence every morning before Mass, the sentence that defined his entire priesthood. He prayed it with his bleeding hands pressed together, his eyes closed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Stay with me, Lord, for without you, I am nothing. Without you, I fall. Without you, I am lost in the dark." That is the prayer of a man who understood Holy Week. Now go, confess, pray your rosary with your whole heart, fast on Good Friday until you feel it. Forgive the person whose name just came to your mind. You know exactly who it is. Sit with the Passion for 10 silent minutes and let it cost you something. Bring everything, all your coldness, all your distance, all your numbness. Lay it at the foot of the cross. Padre Pio will be praying for you. If this video cracked something open in you, a conviction, a recognition, a hunger you haven't felt in a long time, share it right now before you scroll. One share might be the alarm that wakes up a soul that has been sleeping through too many Holy Weeks. And if you haven't yet, get our ebook, The Spiritual Secrets of Saint Padre Pio, from the link pinned in the comments. Powerful prayers, teachings, a practical guide for your spiritual life. Get it today. Holy Week starts in 6 days. Don't enter that week unarmed.